Okay, so you saw on your programs that my talk is titled Unified AppLinks Integration with No Hassles. Since it's the last talk of Summit and it's 4:15 and everyone's probably very tired, I've decided to change the title. So I'm making my topic about beer. I have 6 beers here. Now, one of these, actually, 2 of these are going to be for me, and the remaining 4 will be for the 4 best questions that get asked at the end. So there is a reward to staying till the end and also a reward for staying awake. So, so my topic is Unified AppLinks Integrate Drink Beer. So who here has ever written a plugin for an Atlassian product? Okay, good, a good number of you. And out of those people, who has written a plugin that has integrated to another system? Okay, so a good proportion of the people who have written plugins have written integration plugins. Now what I'm going to show today is I'm going to write an integration plugin from scratch during this presentation. There are no videos here. None of this is pre-recorded. I probably will make mistakes just to show you that I'm doing it live for you. And hopefully the demo gods are on my side. And at the end of it, I'm still going to have a chance to drink a beer. So in spite of writing an entire plugin from scratch, we're still going to drink beer at the end. So I did a survey on the Atlassian plugin exchange, plugins.atlassian.com. I searched for plugins that had integrate in their description or connect in the description. I found that 25% of plugins on the Atlassian plugin exchange integrates to other services. Now that's 25% of about 400 plugins, so that's 100 plugins. And there are plenty more plugins that you guys have possibly written that aren't on the plugin exchange because they're private ones, but that probably have integrated to other systems. So integration is a major point that people write plugins for. There are a lot of common things that happen in integration plugins, and this can often be a source of problems. So for one, we have repeat code. Every integration plugin has some common stuff. There is usually a place to enter a URL. There's a place to enter authentication details. There is a place to maybe configure to, say, link a Jira project to something else in the remote system. And all this stuff is implemented again and again in all the different plugins, and it's just a waste of time. We also have repeat configuration. So if we had 2 different plugins that integrated to the same service, generally the user is going to have to enter that configuration twice, once for each plugin. That's annoying for users. Also, even if they're integrating with different systems, they're going to provide slightly different UIs. People are going to have to learn these different UIs, and it's going to be frustrating for them, just as like that door lock is frustrating. Finally, repeat vulnerabilities. So one thing that we have to deal with when we're integrating is authentication. And authentication can be hard to get right, and when you get it wrong, the consequences are quite large. So these are all the problems that we've encountered when we've been integrating stuff at Atlassian. And so we've come up with a solution, and it's called Unified AppLinks. Not cufflinks, AppLinks. So Unified AppLinks is our solution to all this repeat stuff. The aim of Unified AppLinks is to get you started on implementing your code that integrates to other services so you can focus on just integrating and not all that other boilerplate stuff. So for a start, it provides one configuration screen. Users go to one place in the product to configure links to other applications. It's implemented, you don't have to implement it. You don't have to worry about writing forms for users to enter details. It's already done for you. It does transparent authentication. When you're making a request on a remote system, you might need to do some authentication, say add some HTTP basic headers, If you have ever done that, it's not that simple. You've got a base 64 encode, the username and password separated by a character. Maybe if you're doing OAuth, that's even more complex. There's the whole OAuth dance involved. And AppLinks handles that for you as a plugin developer, all for you, so you don't have to worry about it. And finally, it's pluggable. And that's the thing that I'm going to focus most on this presentation, about how we can extend AppLinks to integrate to any service. Now, if you install Jira 4.3, Confluence 3.5 or Fisheye 2.5 today, you'll find that AppLinks is there out of the box, and you can integrate between Atlassian products out of the box today. You can connect Jira to Confluence, Jira to Fisheye, and it all works nicely and it's very easy. But that's not all AppLinks is designed to do. AppLinks is designed to, from the base, to be pluggable so that we can extend it to integrate to any service. And so what I'm going to do for you today is implement a plugin that will integrate with Twitter. We're going to connect Confluence to Twitter, and I just want to make it very clear, the point of my demo is not how to integrate with Twitter, right? I've chosen Twitter because all of you probably know what Twitter is. Hand up who has a Twitter account. Okay, so anybody that doesn't understand the concept of Twitter or microblogging? Good, so you all understand when I say that what I'm going to do is write a plugin that is going to, when somebody writes a blog post on Confluence, it's going to post a tweet to Twitter to show that blog post. Just a quick architecture of what it's going to look like. I'm actually going to write not one but two plugins. The first plugin I'm going to write is the Twitter blog plugin. Now that's going to be show how, as a plugin developer, you can consume AppLinks, you can consume extensions to AppLinks, and it's going to show just how simple AppLinks makes it to do integrations. Once I've done that, and you've got the context of how AppLinks makes things simple, I'm going to actually go and implement the Twitter UAL plugin, the Twitter Unified AppLinks plugin. Okay, so I'm going to start off with a pre-implemented Twitter Unified AppLinks plugin, and then I'm going to implement that plugin for you, a second version, so that you can see how simple that is. So we're going to be using Unified AppLinks with a plugin into Unified AppLinks to tweet this blog post to Twitter. Now the rest of this presentation is not going to be in PowerPoint, it's going to be in code and in a web browser. So here we have a Confluence admin screen. This is the AppLinks configuration screen, and I already have installed my Twitter extension plugin, my Twitter AppLinks extension plugin, and so we can configure that now. So this is just showing you what it's like to configure AppLinks. Now you can enter a server URL. The thing about Twitter, there's only one Twitter. So there's an option to select a service, and Twitter's there. So
that's something that you've already set up ahead of time now?
Yes, this is something that I've set up. So let me just repeat. To give some context, I'm going to show what it's like to use AppLinks once you've already done it, and then I'm going to implement the Twitter extension. So you'll see me implement this in the second half. Okay, so I've added that app link. It's telling me that I can now configure authentication. So we can go here, go to outgoing authentication, and we can see that Twitter supports OAuth. There's some instructions there on how to set up a Twitter service provider, but I already know some values that are pre-filled. And so there we go. Now just to test this, I've written a very simple servlet. It says I'm not currently logged in. So for those of you that haven't used, that don't understand OAuth, OAuth lets me do something as a particular user on a remote system. So OAuth is going to let me authenticate with Twitter here. So when I click here, it's going to redirect me to Twitter and ask me if I want to authorize Confluence to be able to access my Twitter account. So I say yes, and it takes me back here, and I can see my most recent tweet, and I can tweet again. And if I go here, we can see that that tweet's there. Okay, so one of the things that I want to do when I tweet my blog post is I want to have a hashtag that is specific to whatever space that I tweeted on. So for example, if I had a space about Jira and I wanted to write a blog post about a new Jira feature, I want when I write that blog post for there to be a hashtag that says #Jira at the end. So I'm going to configure that. We're going to use the demonstration space. And this lets me add a link from a space to a Twitter hashtag. So can anybody want to suggest a hashtag name? Ninja. And there we go. So we've now associated this Confluence space to a hashtag called Ninja. Now this is a very, very trivial example just to show you that you can link things to remote entities. So we call the Confluence space an entity, the hashtag is an entity, and they are linked. It's called an entity link. Okay, so now I've showed you configuring a plugin that's already my already written Twitter AppLinks extension. I'm going to show you what it's like to use that as a plugin developer. So we're going to go, and who here has used the Atlassian SDK before? A few people. So you'll be familiar with these commands. Let's create Confluence plugin. This is going to create me a new plugin for Confluence. And it's a little slow because I have a lot of stuff running on this laptop. Okay, so we've created a new plugin. Now we go into Idea and we're going to open up that code. An Idea might take a little bit of time to open it. Now the first thing that I'm going to have to do is, because I'm using this Twitter AppLinks extension, I need to declare a dependency on that. And when Idea comes back. So I go into my POM XML file, and there's my dependency. So this is the thing that I've already written, the Twitter AppLinks plugin. And now I'm going to write some code that's going to use that. So first thing we always do when we write a new Confluence plugin is we delete the example macro. And we're going to create a new class called Twitter blog poster. Okay, so this is going to use the Atlassian event framework to listen for blog post events, and we need to do stuff on initialization and destroy. And we're going to declare some dependencies. So the three dependencies I have there, first is the entity link service. This is the service that will go and get me that configuration for linking Confluence, the Confluence space, or the demonstration space, to the hashtag. So I'm going to use that to look up that configuration. We've got the settings manager, I'm going to use that to look up the Confluence space URL, and the event publisher, I'm going to use that to register for the events that I want to receive. So here's the event registration. If you're using the Atlassian plugin, the Atlassian event publishing framework, make sure you always implement both the after properties set to register and the destroy method to unregister, because if you don't implement the destroy method, you'll end up with a stale reference in the registered for events. So here's our method. I've annotated it with @EventListener, and I've declared the type of event that I want to receive as the parameter. So this is how you register for events in Atlassian event publishing framework. And now I've looked up I forgot to import changes to the Maven POM file. So now I've looked up the entity service, the entity link from the entity service. So you can see here I've called get primary entity link. I could configure multiple entity links, multiple hashtags to be linked to the one space. To keep things simple, I'm only allowing one. When you have multiple entity links configured, one is always considered primary. So this gets me the primary one. I'm passing in the space, so that event.getBlogPost.getSpace. So that's the thing that I'm linking from. And then I'm passing, and that's put in that long thing. I'll just get rid of that. And I'm passing in the Twitter hashtag entity type. Now this comes from the extension that I've already written. And this is the type of link I want. I want all the hashtags that are linked to this space. So now I need to construct my tweet. So this is what is going to be tweeted to Twitter. We are posting the title of the blog post. We're then building a URL, so we've got the base URL, and then the remaining path is the Confluence tiny URL format of the blog post. And then down the bottom, most importantly, is that entity link, which we configured to be Ninja. So that's that's our hashtag. Now we want to actually make the call on Twitter, and this is the most important part. So an entity link is associated with an application link. So that was the Twitter application link that we configured, where we configured authentication. From there, we want to make a request. We don't want to care about how the user configured authentication, because we saw we configured OAuth before, but if Twitter allowed it, we might have also configured HTTP basic. We don't want to care what it's using. We don't want to care how to use that authentication. We just want to use authentication. So an application link has something called a method for creating an authenticated request factory. So this gives me a factory that lets me create requests. And those requests will be transparently authenticated. So if you know anything about the Twitter API, in order to post a tweet, you create a request with the post method, and then you need to pass the URL as the second argument, and that the URL is that. And we'll add some crude exception handling. So we're going to make a request to this URL. At this point, we could add custom headers, we could add a custom request body and things like that. But for the Twitter API, this is all we need at this point in time. And so we go ahead and execute it. And some crude exception handling. And there we go. That's all the code I need to make a post when somebody posts a blog post to Twitter. We've got one thing left to do, and that is to configure our plugin descriptor. So the first thing we need, because AppLinks itself is a plugin to the plugin system, when you use components from it, you need to import them. If it comes from the host application, so if it was Confluence that provided this, then I wouldn't need to do this, but because it comes from another plugin, I need to component import that entity link service that we depend on. And I also need to declare my component, the Twitter blog poster that I just implemented. Okay, and now we are actually done. So I'm going to use the Atlassian SDK again, the CLI, and this is going to install the Twitter blog poster into my Confluence instance. So this takes a little while. I'm compiling the plugin. And now it's installing it into Confluence. It's a little slow, and now we're done. So let's see if it works. We're in the demonstration space. We're going to add a blog post. And I'll save that blog post. Now let's see if the demo gods are going to be kind to me. And there we go, there's our tweet. So you can see our title, the link, and that hashtag that we configured of Ninja. Okay, so that once you've implemented an AppLinks extension, that's how easy it is to use it. You don't have to worry about the configuration screen or about how things are authenticated, whether you're using OAuth or whether you're using HTTP Basic. It's all done for you, and you can consume it that easily. So now the question is, how hard is it to actually implement that extension? How much have I done to do that? So we're going to write a new plugin. We're going to call it Twitter AppLinks extension. And now we'll jump back into our IDE. And hopefully this will be a little quicker to open this time because it's already got stuff cached, and it does. So we don't need to worry about any dependencies this time because the AppLinks dependencies that we're using are already in Confluence. We will delete the example macro. So the first thing we want to do is we want to declare that Twitter is an application that Confluence or any Atlassian product can integrate with. So we're going to create a Twitter application type. Okay, so this is going to implement a class, an interface. This interface is called non-AppLinks application type. Now that might sound a bit unintuitive. What it means is that Twitter itself doesn't run AppLinks. Okay, Twitter haven't gone and installed the AppLinks plugin on their service. So that tells AppLinks a few things about Twitter, like it doesn't have these special REST interfaces that can be used to look up some metadata and things like that. Generally, if you're writing an extension to a third-party service, that's what you want to implement. Now, each type needs a type ID. Okay, this is based on a string. We're calling it Twitter demo. The reason why I'm calling it Twitter demo is because I'm going to install it into Confluence alongside my existing Twitter application type, and I don't want it to conflict there. And now we're going to implement some methods. By the way, I've actually written a set of blog posts that goes through all this in a lot of detail. So if I'm going too fast, if you're not taking down all this code in your head, which you probably aren't, I'll give you a link at the end, or you can just go to the Atlassian developer blog and you can read the set of blog posts, 3 blog posts. They go very in depth into exactly the reasons behind all the decisions and everything that I'm doing. And you can read those, and it's a tutorial. So we'll implement these methods. Now the first thing is to get an internationalization key. We're not going to worry about internationalization today, so we'll just return a hard-coded string. Icon URL, pretty simple there, and we want to return that type ID. Okay, so now we've implemented the application type. Now, what this is used for is when somebody wants to look up links that are of the Twitter application type using the application link service. We used the entity link service before, but you can also look up links that aren't associated with an entity. So if somebody wants to look that up, they'll pass in this class as the type, as the descriptor that says what type of thing they want. So this is kind of the API that we're providing. But AppLinks needs to know a little bit more about this Twitter application type in order to work. What it needs from us is a manifest, and the way we provide it with a manifest is using something called a manifest producer. Okay, so it's going to implement this manifest producer class, and that's got a few methods in it. So get manifest and get status. Now both of these methods accept a URI. That URI is what the user would have entered on the application link configuration wizard. So for example, if I want to connect Confluence to Jira, I'll enter the base URL of Jira into Confluence. That would then go That would then go here and pass that URI to here to go and look up information about that. In the case of Twitter, because we weren't even entering a URI before, and because Twitter is not is just one service, we can actually ignore that URI because we know that there's only one Twitter URI. The easiest one to implement is get status. You could implement something that goes and checks if Twitter is up, but we all know that Twitter is incredibly reliable. Nobody's ever seen the fail whale, have they? And we're just going to hard code available. So the next thing is get manifest. Now this method, you could implement an HTTP request to go out and get information from the remote service, but because it's Twitter and we already know everything about what Twitter supports, we're going to hard code a manifest with an anonymous inner class. So, okay. So there's a few more methods here. I've pre-implemented most of them. The most important one that I want to point out here is this get inbound authentication types. This means this tells AppLinks what types of authentication does Twitter support when making requests inbound to Twitter. So we're going to pretend that the time is about a year ago. If you're familiar with Twitter's history, they used to support HTTP basic authentication on their API as well as OAuth, and then they discontinued that last year. So, but we're going to pretend it does, just so I can show you how multiple authentication types can be used. So, basic authentication provider, and of course it also supports OAuth. So we're declaring here that Twitter supports two types, basic and OAuth. Now in other methods we've got the type ID, so that's the type ID for the application type that this is. A unique application ID, there's only one Twitter, so we're hard coding that there. This could go if the application was published an ID that was unique to it, we could get that from an HTTP request to that application. Or we could generate one from the URL that's passed in for that application. A name, we're calling it Twitter demo. A URL if it's different from what the user entered. And then a few other metadata things, version, build number, AppLinks version if it supports AppLinks, and outbound authentication types. That's useful if you want to configure things to allow the remote application to access you. Twitter doesn't try and access us, so we're not going to declare any of those. And now we're done with the application type, we just need to add something to our plugin descriptor. So we've declared our application type as a AppLinks application type and our manifest producer that's associated with it. And now we're going to install that into our Confluence, our running Confluence instance. And that's successful. So we'll go back to Confluence. We'll go to admin. All the way down the bottom we find application links. We'll delete the old one because we've already got that. And now we're going to add one. Now you'll notice that it doesn't appear in the list of services here. The reason for that is because I declared it as a non-AppLinks application link. There is actually another interface that I could have implemented called a static URL application link, and that's what I implemented for the demo extension here. That actually has another method that allows you to return the URL. So if you're implementing an integration to a service where there's one instance, like Twitter, that's what you would use. Or if you're implementing something where people go in and install it on their own service, so there's multiple base URLs, you'd use the non-AppLinks application type, and they would enter a URL here like this. Now at this point it's actually trying to detect whether it's an Atlassian application on the other side, and usually it goes faster than this. There we go. So it hasn't detected what sort of application it is. That's because Twitter doesn't support AppLinks and can't return that information. But we can select Demo Twitter from here. So that's the plugin that we just created. And we'll call that Twitter. And we have to hit Create. Okay, so there's our application link. Again, we can configure authentication. And remember that we declared both that it supports both OAuth, and there's all the details for OAuth, and basic access. Now you might notice here that this screen is a bit different to the screen that I showed before. This is the generic OAuth provider that Atlassian has already written that you can use. It lets me enter all the information that you need to know for an OAuth consumer. So there's the name, the key, the secret, as well as a number of callback URLs. For the extension that I was showing before, I implemented a custom one that pre-filled a lot of that data so that you didn't need it. I could have actually hard-coded the consumer keys and consumer secrets so that it didn't even need those. For the sake of the tutorial in the blog posts, I've shown what it's like to provide some configuration. So implementing a custom authentication provider is quite beyond the scope of this talk. It's many classes and quite complex stuff, especially for OAuth. But you can check the blog post where I explain how to do that. But as for just straight OAuth, we could use this screen here to configure OAuth to Twitter. I'm not going to worry about doing that right now though. Next thing we want to do is the entity link type. So that hashtag entity link type where it let us configure that hashtag. So we go back into our IDE, and you'll recognise the name of this entity type. You'll recognise the name of this class. This is the class that I used before in the Twitter Confluence blog poster when I looked up that entity link from the entity link service. So it's going to implement non-AppLinks entity type, which is similar to the non-AppLinks application type. And like the application type, we have a type ID, which has to be unique. And then we've got a few methods to implement. First of all, get the application type that's associated with this. So this will be the Twitter application type that we just wrote before. Again, we're not going to worry about internationalization, so demo hashtag and pluralized key. An icon URL, we'll use the Twitter fave icon again. Now get displayable URL is an interesting one. If a consumer of an entity link wants to say render a link, as in a hypertext link, to that entity link, they can use this get displayable URL method. And what they can do is render a URL. In this case, I've rendered a URL to the hashtag, which uses the Twitter search URL. So you can see I've actually got the display URL from the application link. I could have just hard-coded Twitter because it's Twitter, but if it wasn't a service like Twitter, you'd use application link.getDisplayURL, and I've entered the hashtag there. Finally, that type ID that we wrote. And that's the code required. And now we've got a very simple declaration of that in our plugin descriptor. And now we're going to install that. And this should be quite quick. And now we can go into Confluence space directory. And there's our demo Twitter link, and here's our demo hashtag. So we could configure that again. The name here, by the way, is just an arbitrary name for your own reference. For a hashtag, it doesn't really make sense. And there we have it. So what have I showed you? I've showed you how to consume AppLinks once you've already written an extension, and I've shown you how to write an extension for AppLinks to integrate to Twitter, and how easy it is to do that for any service. So now we'll go back to the slides, and there's one more thing that I want to show you. So we see some code here. It looks very similar to the blog poster that we had in Confluence, except this code is actually for Jira. The Twitter AppLinks extension that I wrote actually runs in Jira. I didn't have to do anything special to make it run in Jira, and I've subscribed to an event here for when a Jira version has been released. And I've created a tweet that will talk about that version, and then similar to before, I've posted that to Twitter. And let's see what happens when we try and use that. So we can see this is now the Jira admin screen, which has project links for Twitter Summit demo. I've already configured a hashtag here. And so we're going to go to the administration for this Twitter Summit demo project. And I'm going to release version 1.0. And now we find not one, but two tweets. The first tweet was that one that you saw that I'd posted. Twitter Summit Demo 1.0 has been released, and you can see the link to it and that hashtag of Summit Demo. And the second one is magic. Thank you for attending my presentation. If you want to take down that link there, that's a link to the blog posts. The first one has been published. The next two will come out in the following few days, and they will have far more detailed information in a tutorial style to get there. So, I'm going to drink my beer. Anybody got any questions?